know it's traumatic. Even if you learn how to cope with it and, and see it for what it is, it still has an impact on you emotionally. I mean, it's like being in the eye of the storm. You have things coming at you from every angle. You know what killed me? The injustice. When Benghazi happened, first of all, I didn't know that they had massive attack machines that were well funded, like Media Matters for America, whose only job was to destroy people. I had no idea those things existed and were so well funded. And then on top of that, you have all these people that are attacking my reporting, none of whom have even watched the report. Because if they had, they couldn't be writing what they're writing. Because their stories are just riddled with things that are blatant lies. So you're being judged and, hanged, drawn, and quartered by people for the crime of not doing real journalism, not doing your job properly, by people who are not even vaguely doing journalism. It was just the injustice of that. And then, I'm a fighter, so I want to go out and fight, but I can't, because at that point, when they attacked my 60 Minutes report, I had to put 60 Minutes, CBS, I had to put the show, the team, my colleagues, I had to put them first. It wasn't up to me. It wasn't what I wanted. I had to do what was best for everyone else. And so
internally in the news organizations, CBS, what was that conversation like? Someone come up to you and say, Lara, we have to have a talk. Like what happened if those walls could talk in the corporate sense?
Well, in the corporate sense, our story on Benghazi went out, and it was a great piece, and it was very powerful. And at that time, I was winning awards for almost everything that I did, and I was in New York Post, New York Times, Washington Post. I had a big voice at that time, and so our stories were, and we were really good as a team. We'd gotten really, really good. We were doing amazing work, and so it was a powerful story. And what was weird was, what was so powerful about that piece. Someone like Greg Hicks, the deputy ambassador who replaced Chris Stevens, the last person to speak to him alive that night when they were attacked in Benghazi, he had said this under oath on Capitol Hill. It was just when he said it to me in that 60 Minutes format, and the power of that shot, looking into his eyes, when I asked him, remember the furore over, was it one attack in Benghazi? Was it two attacks? Did they know the second one was coming? Did they try and do anything? Blah, blah, blah. Everybody's screaming, right? There's all this political noise. And that story came down to one moment. When Greg Hicks says to me, I looked at the defense attaché, and I know the defense attaché in any embassy is the top spy, right? For the United States government. He says, I looked at the defense attaché and I said, well, and he looked at me and he said, I'm sorry, Greg, the cavalry ain't coming. He said, and that decision, he said it was 10 minutes into the attack, and that decision never, ever changed. He said, and I felt sick in the pit of my stomach, because it was at that moment I realized that every single one of us who goes out on the end of the line for our country, we believe our country has our back. And right then I knew it wasn't true. He said, and I looked at him and I said, we better tell the boys at the annex. Now, 2 of those boys at the annex died that night because that decision didn't change. And they decided that they weren't going to do what the United States has done since this country was founded, which is no man left behind. They weren't going to fight for their people. They weren't even going to try. So all of that noise didn't matter. So I didn't attack Hillary Clinton in my story. There was one line of narration about
attack
her.
Hillary Clinton. That's their usual
argument.
Attack. You're reporting the facts.
I didn't even mention her at all. And my boss, in one change that we had in the screening, he had us mention her name. Yeah. And that was it. One reference to her in the whole piece. Right. But what happened was there were 3 people in that story. They attacked one person's version. Only one part of his story, by the way, was called into question. Only one. But if you read what was written about that piece online, you would think that every single thing in there was made up. And I didn't understand, because I wasn't Democrat or Republican. Right. I didn't grow up in this country. I didn't care. It didn't even occur to me. Yeah. We thought that George Bush was the embodiment of evil, and Dick Cheney and Rumsfeld and all of them, because they were lying about, I was on the ground reporting in Iraq and they were lying. So I hated them. And I thought, oh, great, we're getting the good guys. And then they turn out not to be the good guys. And then you're like, are there any good guys? You know, I mean, that's where I
That was
was
my
at.
read on it, observing it. I was like, oh, she's a reporter, she's factual, but she stumbled into a narrative that isn't
A hornet's nest. Because
hornet's
there was a
nest.
political election and she was vulnerable. Hillary Clinton was vulnerable on Benghazi because they let Americans die and because of all the off the book stuff that they were doing.
Did CBS management? I mean, you were at 60 Minutes for a number of years after that, 5 years or so. You stayed there,
Because they couldn't fire me because I didn't do anything wrong.
but did they ever try to your
Oh, they
knowledge?
tortured me.
Did someone? That's what I'm saying.
Oh,
Take
yeah.
me into the room
Well-
where the manager talks to you.
So just
or
like Gary
editor.
Webb, when at first his story comes out and everyone's going, wow, and he's getting the Pulitzer,
Oh, yeah.
right? The CIA starts going behind his back. That's immediately what happened with me. The same machinery.
Give me an example.
Exactly the
What was
same.
it like?
They went to people in Washington. Every reporter in Washington was visited by a contact, whether they were from the State Department, which is just a front for the CIA anyway, or whether it was, you know, like Scott Pelley. I remember getting a call once, the one day from my boss, and he said, John Kerry's press person has contacted Scott Pelley. And he says, oh, you better stay away from that Benghazi stuff. What that guy told you guys isn't true. So now you've got another reporter. They're playing one reporter off against the other reporter.
Be careful of her.
Yeah, be careful.
But what
And-
did you hear first person at CBS?
Well, the first thing, they start to chip away at the story. So they attacked us because we didn't mention that the
CBS News did. I'm talking about 60 Minutes
I'm
itself.
talking,
Yeah.
yes, I'm talking about CBS and 60 Minutes immediately came under attack, right? So one of the things that they were criticized for was that they hadn't revealed that the one character had written a book, and it was a subsidiary of Simon and Schuster that published it, and Simon and Schuster was the same, you know, ownership as CBS. So that had been my boss's decision. So he's like, fine, let's own that one and say we should have said that. Nobody cared that it was Simon
Right.
Schuster. It never even was. It didn't make any difference to any of us. So we hadn't mentioned it, but that was a corporate decision, not ours. So, you know, they chip away at it until they finally can get their hooks. So they produced a document that was supposedly an after-action report. They shopped this document around to all
CBS did.
No, the State Department.
State Department.
Well, which is, you know, whoever, right? And they're taking it to all these other journalists. And so then the rumblings start in the media, and the calls start coming into
Right.
the CBS press office, you know, and then Media Matter, of course, they're going nuts, and they're criticizing you and putting you under pressure. And then it was, they produced this report that contradicted what the one witness, only one part of his story, one part. And he says, I never seen that report. I didn't write it. The deputy ambassador says it's got a stamp on it that says U.S. Embassy Benghazi. That's a fake stamp. He said, first of all, it was a special mission compound, which in diplomatic terms is totally different. Secondly, I saw every piece of paper that was there, and I never saw that paper. So, and even if it was real, it would have been a classified document. You couldn't show it around, but reporters don't care. So they get their little mouthpiece at the Washington Post to do the first story, and they chip away.
It's almost like they feed these, like the reporters work for the deep state. They are an extension of it. You know?
It's just an extension of it.
They just feed
so
it.
then, you know, 60 Minutes stands by the story. Now they're under pressure. And then the guy disappears. The character in our story who's under attack, he disappears.
I see.
And once he's gone, if he's not there to defend himself, we can't defend him anymore. And everything collapses.
Everything collapses.
And of course, he said, I told the FBI everything that happened. So what does the FBI do? They don't come out and say he's lying. You get the whisper campaign. And, you know, oh, the FBI says they knew this guy was a liar the moment they saw him on TV. Except I have the emails that show the CIA, the State Department, the FBI, they all went to this guy's house and met with him in Wales to get his firsthand eyewitness testimony. And then the FBI went back and met with him in London to bring him photographs of suspects from the attack. But I can't report it because it's an undercover agent, and we had agreed not to blow his cover. And when we call the FBI and call the agent and say we want to, you know, we want to ask you some questions, what do? I get called into my boss's office because the head of the FBI is called the head of
Who was
CBS.
your boss at the time?
Jeff Fager, but this was the number 2, Bill Owens, who then became the boss. And I get told, what are you doing calling FBI agents and screaming and shouting at them. And you're like, what? What? Something that didn't even happen. So the operation is underway. And basically what
Information
happens,
operation.
Les Moonves, who was head of the whole of CBS at the time, he calls me on the Friday night after I've had to do these torturous apologies.
President of CBS News.
No, he was higher than the president. He was the chairman.
Chairman of CBS Corporation.
Well, Viacom.
Viacom called you.
Yes. And he says to me, because I had to do the morning show, I had to eat crow on the morning show, and then I had to eat crow in the studio, and that was going to for 60 minutes. And then I was on my way home, and I remember he called me and he said, you know, Lara, you are amazing, and we love you. You are family, and we will stand, by you through all of this. You didn't do anything wrong, and so on. And by Monday morning, when I have to go back, take the train back from Washington, D.C., back up to New York, my boss calls me in and he's like, I'm really sorry. I don't want to do this.
Your boss being who?
Jeff Fager.
Jeff Fager.
He says, but I have to put you on leave.
This is after the chairman of Viacom called you and said they'll stand by you.
Yeah. And he said they're baying for blood. This is so the media matters.
They're baying for...
They're baying for blood,
they're
right?
what?
They're baying for your blood.
Baying for your blood.
They want you fired.
We need to give them...
We got to give them something.
A pound of flesh.
Right. And so, but, he felt boxed in, right? And he didn't want to do it. And I know that because...
But he needed to feed the beast.
Well, when he told me that, I said, can it just be me and not Max? I didn't want it to be my producer. And he had a corner office overlooking the Hudson. And I remember he looked out of the window. He couldn't speak. And when he turned back, he had tears rolling down his cheeks. And I'd never seen him cry. And I worked for him for 16 years. And he said, I knew you'd say that. He said, I absolutely knew you would say that. He said, you are, without a doubt, the best person on this floor. I said this, and it killed him. He didn't want to do it. And, but you work for a corporation, and there's, when all the political forces are marshaled against you, all the power of the intelligence apparatus, the media, you have to make the decisions that you can make. And he was going to bring me back immediately. But someone heard that, they leaked it to the media, and then they did another hit piece. And then when they realize that the initial smear is not going to work, that you're still standing, and they're bringing you back, then they go in for the kill. They do the strategic piece. That's when the Atlantic, or Vanity Fair, or in my case, New York Magazine. That's when they do the long form piece.
Right.
And then you can't come back until the long form piece comes out, because now they don't know what it's going to... They don't want to have to do another round of damage control.
Sometimes those writers at Vanity Fair, even if they make you look like a villain, they write well.
Yeah.
They use big words.
Oh, yeah. They make it entertaining. And when it comes out, guess what? I'm only attacked in like a third of it. What is it really about? They did a very strategic hit because they dragged Les Moonves into it, and up to that point, his name had never been mentioned.
Right.
And then they dragged my boss into it and made him sound like he was in love with me, which was total nonsense. And so, and that he treated me differently. I got special treatment, which was not true at all. So what did he do then? He spent the next few years proving to everybody that he didn't.
Proving?
Yeah. Trying to prove to everybody.
Trying to prove that he's innocent of what he has been reported about. Yeah.
Which is of treating me differently.
Another
so
denial
then
of
I
service
got treated
attack.
like trash by everybody. So, and I just wasn't, they had no reason to fire me. In fact, the night that I left, that first night when it all collapsed and I knew in the morning I had to come and apologize on TV, there were a couple guys on the street waiting for me to leave. And I'm pretty damn sure they went right up to my office and went through my computer and all my drawers and everything looking for something, grounds to fire me. There was no grounds to fire me, even though they did this ridiculous report where they try to pin it on Max and I and say that we didn't do our jobs. The reason we didn't do the things in the report that they said we didn't do was very simple. We signed an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement with the publisher of this one character in the story, that we would not disclose the details of what he did that night. It was written by CBS. It was their attorney who drafted it. It was CBS who said we should sign it. And when they did a report excoriating us for our poor journalism, All the things they said we didn't do, we didn't do them because we signed an NDA. And when we said that, they said, well, that doesn't mean anything. It's like, you sign a legal document on behalf of your company. I'd never done one. I'd never done that before. I took it very seriously. They said, well, it doesn't mean that you can't do this, and it doesn't mean you can't call the FBI or call the State Department and tell them what is in this guy's book, that he says if they find out I'm about to publish this, they're going to come after me, and you've signed a legal document. Mm-hmm. And everyone says to you, that doesn't mean anything. You know, it doesn't mean anything when they want to pin it all on you and use it to destroy you.
Into the buzzsaw. It's just into the buzzsaw. What is your price? Because if your price is not your life, then you are for sale.